John Trujillo, following my dad, Bob. Bob and Bill are a really tough act to follow. So many great stories. I've been honored today and asked by the Galardi family and by Dennis Case from GGI to step up for a few moments and represent the entire franchise community, our franchisee family, if you will. Today we celebrate John, our paternal leader's life. And from everything that's been said so far today, there certainly is a lot to celebrate. John ran his business with family values, compassion, caring, fun, and integrity. I first got to experience his wonderful character when I was a boy, growing up in Southern California. I grew up in Rolling Hills, and for many years, John and his family also made a home in Rolling Hills. I remember many parties there at John's almost Olympic-sized swimming pool with Myrna, Teresa, Karen, my family, Glenn Bell's family, the Robinsons, the Linders, all from the area at these great pool parties, all having a lot of fun. As a young boy, though, I must admit I was a little nervous around John. I was a little intimidated by him and felt that maybe he wasn't a kid person. As a 7-year-old, I was kind of picking up on that. That changed when I was very little. I was about 7 years old. My parents were sending me off to a Catholic summer camp for 2 weeks. I really didn't want to go. I was to be dropped off at a Catholic church on La Brea Boulevard in downtown Los Angeles and put on a bus. It was a Saturday, and my dad and John had decided they were going to go out hunting for sites and doing research, so they got the car pulled together and put me in the back, and together they drove me up to the church on La Brea Boulevard. I cried and didn't talk the entire way downtown. Ultimately, we got there, hugged my dad, he got me on the bus, and I went off to camp for 2 weeks, and that's a whole other story. When I got back, my dad tells me that he got back in the car, and John said, "I don't think Tommy wants to go." I was very touched when I heard that remark a couple weeks later, and it made me realize that John was indeed a kid person, and it also made me realize he was extraordinarily observant. As I got older, my dad would often take John to the airport for business trips. We didn't, when we were on the slim, there wasn't a lot of limos and cars and sedans going to the airport, so my dad would take John in whatever John's sports car of the year was, and that car would sit in our driveway. I'll never forget borrowing the Porsche Targa for a spin around the peninsula. And once I even drove John's blue Ferrari down the Harbor Freeway at 110 miles an hour. But I will mention that my dad was in the car riding shotgun on that trip. I did not have the car alone that time. Always an innovator, doing things different, John bought a bakery for baking his own hot dog buns. A very bold move. Started out as Swedish bakery, and ultimately was renamed Eagle Bakery, and started making hamburger buns as the hamburger product came along. I temporarily left the Wiener Schnitzel operations and spent all of my college years, and probably 4 or 5 years after college, working at that bakery in Wilmington. It was a great experience. As a side note, my dad made the decision to close the bakery down around 1980, effectively putting me out of a job. And Dad, I didn't even get that free Thursday lunch. No grass has ever grown under John's feet. In 1982, he wanted to open up a 1-hour photo chain, totally different than the fast food business. I was pulled out of store operations to help with developing this concept. Here is where I really learned a lot about John. Being mentored by him as we developed the concept from the ground up, the decor, the building, the equipment decisions, marketing, everything. John was very hands-on in the early stages of this development, and it was the closest that he and I ever worked together one-on-one in my career with Wiener Schnitzel. It was also the first time that I had the pleasure of being introduced to Cindy. It was an interesting time for the company. My father had just left, John was back in the office as president, Dennis Case was hired, Gene Howe from Wendy's came and ultimately went. It was a new era, and after a very short run with the 1-hour photo concept, I was back in the Wiener Schnitzel operations with my own family, and I haven't done anything else ever since. I was truly back in the Wiener Schnitzel franchisee family. Now, there's family, and then there's the extended Wiener Schnitzel family that we have. It's amazing how much family John touched, and how multiple generations enjoy the fruits of John's labor and his creativity. Some of his early franchisees were John's own family. His parents, Ross and Virginia, his brother Phil, and his cousin Phil Peixoto. John's children have all been involved in the business. Teresa, Karen, and now we have JR in GGI's offices in the marketing department. And now we have Cindy's capable hand watching over us, continuing the legacy of family values. My first day of training was at store number 38 in Carson. At that time, the unit was owned by John, my dad, and Bill Linder when I was hired there. The training was handled by Linda Elfman, who had married into the Elfman family, another group that grew with Wiener Schnitzel, and the Elfman name is still represented by Rick in San Angelo. Mr. C, who is Mr. Courtney, and his wife franchised in Texas. Their son Dennis, who was supposed to be here today but had an unscheduled side trip, Dennis is still very, very active in the franchise business in Corpus Christi. Here in Southern California, our Korean community has parents whose children have moved into the Wiener Schnitzel franchisee business. My own family has 2 generations of franchisees in the business, the Hieronymus family and others. My dad's sister, Esther Beard, opened the San Pedro unit and still owns it to this day. But not only that, her daughters, Carol and Cheryl, are also independent franchisees, and Esther's grandchildren have gotten involved working in the stores. 3 generations in our family of franchisees. There are many other names out there, and I'm not singling out these families, only making a point that generation after generation, we have a business that John founded and has grown and been successful. Slightly off my remarks and for just a quick audience participation, if your family has been involved 2 generations or more with John's Wiener Schnitzel family, please raise your hand. 2 generations or more. It's these values that really make us grow, generation after generation. It takes a special person to build a business, a family of franchisees that has seen generation after generation get involved. Dennis earlier reminded us of one of John's most important concepts, one that I subscribe to and a thought that can help us each and every day in our lives, our family lives and our business lives. Attack the problem, not the person. Think about that. Attack the problem, not the person. What a concept. With advice like that and the legacy that John has left, I'm sure we will see more generations of franchise family continue on into the future. Thank you, John, and thank all of you for being here today to celebrate.